Hey guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. My name's Amanda, and today I want to share with you all of the books that I read during the month of December. All right, so during the month of December, guys, I hit a hot streak. I read 20 books in December. Of those 20 books, 12 were middle grade, 8 were adult, and then 6 were physical, and 14 were audio. So all things considered. But I did get through a lot of books this month, or last month. And so, yeah. All right, so I am just going to go through these in the order that I read them, because that's going to be easiest for me. Oh, I forgot to mention as well. I had 4 5-star reads, 12 4-star reads, 2 3-star reads, and 2 2-star reads. So that's kind of the way that the dice fell, for lack of a better term. All right, so I'm going to go through these in the order that I read them because that's just, I have my book list in front of me, so I'm just going to go through them that way. And yeah, let's just get into this. So I started the month by finishing Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. This is the sequel to Ready Player 1, which I listened to a couple of years ago and loved. I found out this one was coming out and immediately knew I wanted to listen to it again because the audiobooks are narrated by Will Wheaton and they are chef kiss amazing. All right, I have heard a lot of negative things about Ready Player 2. However, I, for one, enjoyed it. It was not as good as Ready Player 1. It recycled a lot of the same kind of plot points as Ready Player 1, but it was still fun. It was still enjoyable. It was still a lot of 80s, early 90s nostalgia. It follows our main character from Ready Player 1, Wade Watts, in kind of the next step of his adventure, which I can't really talk about because it would be a spoiler for Ready Player 1, but he's with his same group of friends and they're just kind of on a new expedition, so to say. I did feel like this one was much more rushed than Ready Player 1 was, so I will say that. It also contained quite a bit of explicit content, which I don't remember from Ready Player 1, but I still found the book overall enjoyable and nostalgic and fun, and so I gave it 4 stars. All right, the next book that I read, sorry if you can hear doors opening and closing, kids are going in and out of the house, and I'm not going to complain about that, so we're just going to deal. But the next book that I read in December is Missing Mike by Sherry Green. This is a book that I read because I read Macy McMillan and the Rainbow Goddess last month, the month before, I don't remember. And I had someone on Instagram tell me that Sherry Green's book, Missing Mike, was just as good. It's a book written in verse. It's middle grade, and it follows a girl who is dealing with the wildfires out west of North America. I actually think that this is set in Canada, but kind of on the west coast, and she has to evacuate her home because of wildfires, and in the process has to leave her dog. Her dog kind of went missing at the last minute and she has to leave her dog. And so it's all about how she's dealing with being evacuated and kind of what's going on with her family, as well as her trying to find her dog. And so I did not enjoy this one as much as Macy McMillan, but I still thought it was really, really good. There were a lot of convenient things that happened in the end of it that weren't my favorite. I felt like the book could have made more impact if it wasn't as convenient, but it's middle grade, and so it is what it is, and it's written in verse. I think I mentioned that, and so I ended up giving this one 3 stars. All right, the next book I listened to, and that was Jingle Jingle: The Invention of Jeronicus Jingle by David E. Talbert. This is a novel. I don't know if it's a novelization of the Netflix film or if the Netflix film was made off the book. I honestly don't. I want to say that this is a novelization of the Netflix film that came out, and it's a film that came out on Netflix for Christmas. It's a Christmas story. I was not a fan. I really did not like the audiobook. The audiobook production was done well. There was a lot of sound effects. The narrator was great, all of that. But just the storyline was not my favorite. It's like a historical fantasy where, how do I explain this? It tells the story of Geronicus, who is a toy maker, and some things happen, and he kind of gets sabotaged. And so years later, his granddaughter comes and tries to help him get his glory back, so to say, and kind of raise his spirits and find the spark again. And it was okay. I gave it 2 stars. It was just not worth reading, in my opinion. So the movie was cute, though, I will say that. Go watch the movie, skip the book, in my opinion. All right. The next book I read is a book that I read out loud with my kids. And the book that we chose to read during the Christmas season is A Boy Called Christmas by Matt Haig. This is one I read myself last year and knew I wanted to share with the kids. It is a Santa Claus origin story. And in this book, we follow our main character, Nicholas. I'm like, oh, what was his name? Oh my goodness. Nicholas, whose dad has gone missing, and so he goes on an expedition to find his dad, and in the process finds the elf village. And kind of what becomes of that, the adventures he faces along the way, it deals a lot with magic and happy thoughts and kind of the joy of Christmas and what that means. And I loved it. I loved it the first time I read it. I loved reading it with my kids. There is, like, it's very Roald Dahl-esque. There's a lot of potty humor in it, which the kids think is funny, so I don't mind it because it's not, like, detrimental to the story. I really wish people would stop slamming doors in my house. But anyway, loved it. 5 stars. My kids loved it as well. Highly recommend. All right, the next one that I read, you guys are never going to believe what I finally read. How many TBRs has this been on for the year? I finally got to the end of the year and I'm like, okay, which books do I know I definitely want to read this year? I finally read Wolf Hollow. I'm like, if I get to the end of the year and I have not read this, I'm going to be kicking myself. So I read it. This is Wolf Hollow by Lauren Woke. It is a middle grade historical fiction that is set during World War II. And it is set in, I think, like Pennsylvania. Yeah, Pennsylvania. And it follows Annabelle, who just kind of lives in town. She's always kind of been quiet. And then a bully moves into town and starts threatening a veteran from World War I that has come to town who's kind of a recluse. And this bully has really taken to targeting this veteran. And so it's all about Annabelle and her kind of journey to protect him and stand up for the truth. There was a lot of really, really great writing in this book, but overall the storyline didn't go where I was expecting it to, and it wasn't my favorite, but I really, really, really loved it, and so I gave it 4 stars. The writing I loved. It was a really effective historical fiction for middle grade, and I still recommend it. I still think that the themes that were in it were wonderfully done. And so, yeah, 4 stars for Wolf Hollow. All right. The next one I listened to is The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell by Robert Dugoni. This is one that I listened to on audio, and this is one that it follows the life of Sam Hell. And he is a boy that, or was a boy that was born with ocular albinism. So he had red eyes, and he was denied admission, that's the word, denied admission to a Catholic school that his mom really, really wanted him to go to. And so it kind of just goes through the process of his life, and he befriends the first black kid in their school, and they become best friends, and then things kind of evolve from there. It's told in kind of dual timeline-esque, where you're getting his backstory, but you're also getting modern day what's going on with him as an adult. And it was really well done. I really enjoyed it. However, I don't really remember a whole lot about the story. And so while I rated it 4 stars, I'm kind of second guessing that at this point because I just don't remember any of it. I mean, it's been less than a month since I read it, and I couldn't really tell you much about it that I didn't read off the back of the book. And so there are certain parts of the story that I thought were really effectively done. There is a religious aspect of this that comes into play because his mom is very devout Catholic, and so dealing with someone who is called the devil boy and things like that, how she handled that, how she raised him, in the church, how he kind of grew into that as an adult, and whether he embraces the religion or not is explored. And so I thought that that part was well done. But overall, it was kind of forgettable, but I still apparently enjoyed it, because when I finished it, I gave it 4 stars. You guys, this is the thing with reading so many books in a month, is you just forget some of the things, and it's not great. This is why I'm making a point of trying to slow down this year. Point at hand. So, all right, moving on. The next book that I read is Catching Christmas by Terry Blackstock. This is one that I heard about from Chantel at An Intentional Life. She read it. I think she talked about it in like a mid-month wrap-up or something, and she referenced that it reminded her a lot of Gilmore Girls. One of the characters reminded her of Luke, and I was like, I'll check it out. It is Christian fiction. I know Terry Blackstock is a Christian fiction writer, and so I'm like, we'll see. I really, really enjoyed this one, you guys. It follows a cab driver who is compared in the book to Luke Danes from Gilmore Girls, and he is very much like Luke. And so it follows him and another woman whose grandmother is a passenger of the cab driver. I hope that all made sense. And so I don't remember the characters' names, because that is me. I'm going to get better at that this year too, guys. We're working on these things. But she is a passenger. He takes her to like a doctor's appointment, and then when all is said and done, him and the granddaughter start talking back and forth, and it's just kind of about that. And the grandmother is trying to like marry off her granddaughter, find a man for her granddaughter, play matchmaker, what have you. And the cab driver is just trying to provide transport and to provide support for this elderly lady. And then you have the workaholic granddaughter. I'm sure you can see where this is all going. It was fairly predictable, but I still really enjoyed it personally. And so this one got 4 stars. All right, the next one I read is another middle grade, and it is Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus by Dusty Bowling. I read the first book in this. I don't know if it's going to be a series or just a duology, The Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus last month. And so I went ahead and got Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus this month to read. And I didn't like this one as much as I liked the first one. This follows our same character, Avon, who is now going into high school, and she has no arms. She was born with no arms. This is established in the first book. And so in this book, she's going into high school, and we're kind of just following her struggles, her like trying to fit in high school once again. And then some other things are going on. She lives at like a themed amusement park, like a Western themed amusement park with her family. And some things are going on with one of the employees there, and she's trying to help him out. And so it kind of gets into that as well. So it was really good. I enjoyed it, just not as much as the first one. I gave it 3 stars. All right, next I read The Prophet Calls by Melanie Sumrow. This is one that just like popped up on my Instagram feed. Somebody was talking about it, and I have this fascination with polygamy. I'm fascinated by it, and I love to read about it. And so this is a middle grade book that is told about a polygamous cult. And so we follow our main character, no name, and kind of what's going on with her. And as she's getting older, what's happening with her siblings. And she is the child of a multiple wife, and so kind of what's going on with the different prophets. The prophet of her colony is currently in jail, and so kind of what's happening with that. I just found this book fascinating. It was very predictable, but I still found this is one of those books that I couldn't put down, because I just wanted to know how things resolved. I wanted to know what was going to happen and how we were going. I figured out kind of where we were going, but I still was along for the ride. I still really enjoyed the ride. I thought it was fascinating. It's definitely one that's like older middle grade, because it does talk about like child brides and that sort of thing, which is not, everybody's jam. Don't know as though I want my 10-year-old reading about that, and so that kind of comes in, but there's nothing sexual talked about in it, so there's that too. But it was very interesting read. I gave it 4 stars because it just captivated me. All right, the next one that I read with my kids is The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson. This is a really short children's classic, for better, for lack of a better term, that follows the. I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the family. It's a group of siblings that pretty much terrorize the town, and they somehow get involved with the church pageant for Christmas, and kind of the stakes of what's involved, and are they going to ruin the pageant or not, and what kind of happens. And it's a great story about the meaning of Christmas and how Christmas is there for the unrighteous just as much as the righteous. And I loved it. I love this book. My kids love this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was just fun. The kids laughed hysterically at it. I laughed. I cried. I didn't actually cry. I got a little teary though. At the end, it's a beautiful book. If you haven't read it, go read it. It takes like no time at all. It's super short. All right. Next, we have In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. This is their new holiday romance rom-com. There is a Groundhog Day element to this where she's having to repeat the same day over and over again. The main character, it follows the main character who is at like this cabin that her and her family and a bunch of their friends go to every year. And when they go to leave the cabin, they get in a car accident and she wakes up on the plane going to the cabin. And so that happens a couple of times. This was not my favorite book. This was another one that got 2 stars from me. I really didn't like this book. I have found that with contemporary romance books, I like realistic romances where it's not as contrived and more natural feeling, and this one felt super contrived, very unnatural, and I really liked the Christmas fun aspect of this. A lot of the activities they were doing at the cabin, that sort of thing, that were very festive, I really enjoyed. But the groundhog element only lasts like the first couple of chapters, and then it just kind of evaporates. I just didn't love that. I didn't love the end of it. It was not my favorite. And I have read different reviews on this, and I find that either you really liked it or you really, really didn't. There's not a whole lot of middle ground on it, and I fell in the really, really didn't side of that. So, all right, the next one I read is another Christmas book, and it is The Noel Letters by Richard Paul Evans. You guys, this one was just one I was like, I'm in the mood for Christmassy reads, and I think I went to Scribd, which I'm now a member, a subscriber, whatever you want to call it. And I was just going through Christmas audiobooks to listen to, and I found this one, and the premise sounded good. It's about a book editor that works for like a major publisher and her estranged father who owns an independent bookstore. And she kind of gets a call from her dad that he's dying, she needs to come home for one last time, and kind of what happens with all of that. I loved this book. She starts getting these letters from an anonymous person that have some very poignant points to them. And I just thought that this book was so good. I thought it was so well done. I just loved it. It is Christian fiction too, I believe, but it's not heavy on the Christian aspect. It was just beautiful. It was Christmassy. It was independent bookstore. It reminded me of You've Got Mail, but Christmas kind of. It was very good, in my opinion. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I loved the book element of it. I loved the bookish quotes that were in it all the time. I just loved everything about this. It got 5 stars. All right, the next one, I actually finished up reading a book for homeschooling with my kids, and we were doing kind of a study on poetry, and we finished reading Hate That Cat. This has a red cover, and I took the dust jacket off, and I don't know where it's at right now. But we read Hate That Cat by Sharon Creech. This is the second, like the sequel to Love That Dog, which we read last month, the month before, I don't even remember. And this is just about, I don't even remember what the main character's name is, Jack. And he is in class, and they're talking about poetry. It's written in verse. It's kind of told in a diary format. Each poem has a different date attached to it. And it is about hymn and poetry, and a lot of literary devices are used and explored and explained in this, which I thought was great for school resource. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. I don't really have a whole lot more to say about that. All right. The next one that I read is A Christmas Carol. I listened to the Tim Curry, I think, audiobook version of this, and I really enjoyed it. It was a little hard to follow. I'm not a classics reader, and so there were parts of it that I'm like, I have no idea what's happening right now. But overall, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought that the end was fantastic. It's the classic Christmas Carol story. You can't go wrong with it. After I read this, I watched the newest Disney version with like Jim Carrey and a few other people, the animated, and oh, that was super like well done and very literal to the book, super literal to the book, and scary at parts. Like, I'm like glad I was working on some other things at the time while I was watching it, and I'm kind of glad because it was kind of freaking me out a little bit, to be honest. And it's an animated movie, but it was really well done. And so anyway, I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I'm just not a classics reader, and it was kind of confusing at times. All right. The next book I picked up because I saw Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand haul this, and then I went to the library and saw it, and I'm like, I should probably just get it. So I got The Strangers by Margaret Peterson Haddix. I heard Sarah explain it, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds good. So I got the book from the library. Then I came home and I downloaded the audiobook and listened to the entire thing in one day. This follows the Greystone kids who find out one day in the national news that these kids have been kidnapped, and they're siblings, and they all have the same names as them, and they're all the same ages as them. And then they find out they have the same birthdays as them, and they're like, wait a minute, something fishy's going on here. And then their mom disappears, and they're on this mission to figure out what is happening and where their mom went and what's going on with these other kids and deciphering clues that their mom left behind. It was fascinating. I was along for the ride. It ended in a way that I was not expecting it to go there, but it was enjoyable, and I really enjoyed the narration of this. The narrator did a fantastic job giving each of the kids their own voice. It's 3 different kids, and it's told from all of their point of views. It's one narrator, but each kid has their own distinct voice, and I really enjoyed that. So yeah, it was very interesting. It was good. I recommend for middle grade kids. I gave it 4 stars. All right. Next, let's see. I'm having to keep going back to my list. All right, next I read another book in verse, another middle grade book in verse, and it was one that I wanted to get to before the end of the year, and that is Closer to Nowhere by Ellen Hopkins. This was so good. This follows cousins, Hannah and Calvin, and Hannah is an only child, and she's a gymnast, and she's in dance, and has a happy family, and she's used to kind of doing her thing and having her parents' full support. And then her cousin Calvin comes to live with them. Calvin's mom has recently passed away, and his dad's in jail. And he has a lot of behavior issues and a lot of hurt and a lot of just baggage that he's dealing with. And he definitely provides a bump in the road for Hannah and her perfect world. And it's told from both of their point of views, altering point of views, and it goes back and forth between how he's feeling and how she's feeling. They're both the same age. They end up in the same class at school, and it's really hard on Hannah, and Calvin is just struggling. It talks a lot about what happened with Calvin, why he is acting the way he does. It talks a lot about Hannah and her parents and their relationship and how they're handling Calvin being there, because his mom feels an obligation to Calvin because it was her sister's son. And her dad is like, this kid is trouble and I do not want him here. And so there's definitely a rift there, and that is definitely explored. I thought that this book was so well done. Definitely highly recommend. It's told in verse, so it's a very quick read. I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I think that's all I have to say about that. All right, the next one that I read is The Christmas Box by Richard Paul Evans. This one I read because after I got done with the Noel letters, I went and looked for things by Richard Paul Evans, and The Christmas Box is one of his most famous books, and so I went ahead and I listened to that. It's I think it might even be a novella. It's pretty short, and it talks about a family who goes to live with this elderly lady as kind of their housekeepers, and they find in the attic this box, this really ornate box, and she refers to it as a Christmas box. And so they kind of explore why that box is there, what's the relation to the elderly lady with this box, like what's going on. And it comes to find out that it is a box full of letters that she has been writing, and so they're trying to figure out what's going on with that. It's set around Christmas time. She's sick. They end up taking care of her. It is a beautiful story. I gave it 4 stars. I personally like the other Richard Paul Evans book that I read better, but this one was really well done. It's really short, and if you're in for or if you are looking for a great, more like profound Christmas book and not like a light and fluffy one, this would be one to check out for sure. All right, the next one that I listened to is The Night I Met Father Christmas by Ben Miller. This is one that I think I don't even know where I heard about it. I apparently put it on hold somewhere and don't even know because it just came in on my library holds, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is. But I downloaded it and I listened to it anyway because it sounded fun. And ends up that I loved it. It's middle grade. It is a Santa origin story crossed with a Christmas Carol retelling. So it's told from the point of view of this boy who, his belief in Father Christmas is dwindling, and he is, kind of struggling, and so he decides he's going to wait up and he's going to meet Father Christmas. And he does, and Father Christmas takes him on a sleigh ride and tells him this story about this elf and how this elf meets these spirits of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future, and kind of what comes of it. It was beautiful. It was kind of hokey. It's middle grade though. It's Christmas. It was fun. The narrator was amazing. Like the audio production of this, I loved. It made it in my top 5 audiobooks of the year because the narration was just so great. And it was just a fun Christmas book for kids. So I recommend it for middle grade kids. All right. And then, and I rated that 5 stars just because I loved it. I enjoyed it. All right. Next, I read 25 Days Till Christmas by Poppy Alexander. This is one, I was just looking for Christmas books, like I said, and the cover looked cute, so I put it on hold. It was not quite what I was expecting. It was very dark for a Christmas book, but I still really, really enjoyed it. It follows a single mother who, her husband was died in combat. He was in the military. And she has a son, and she is kind of struggling with her grief, but also needs to make Christmas special for her son. And so it's told from her point of view. She kind of had to get a job last minute. She hates it. She's struggling with some things at work. They're broke. They have no money. She's just trying to do her best. And then the other perspective is from a man whose sister has recently passed away. He was very close with his sister. He was her caretaker. And so he is, just kind of sad. I mean, he's grieving. And so it's told from both of their points of view. It's a very intentional book. It talks a lot about different mental health issues, grief issues, and it's all takes place over the holidays, and it really explores grief during the holidays. I really enjoyed it. It was just sad compared to some other lighter, fluffier rom-com type books. I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book of the year that I finished is another middle grade book in verse because I went on a rampage and checked out a ton at the library and I needed to read them. So I read Becoming Muhammad Ali by James Patterson and Kwame Alexander. This is, like I said, a book in verse, and it is about Muhammad Ali and kind of his history and how he became what he was. I enjoyed this. I thought it was great. However, I felt like we got a lot of the early years of his boxing, and then it just like rushed through all the like nitty gritty part of it, when he became Muslim and when he became a pacifist, and all of that was just kind of rushed through. And so we got a lot of the like how he got started in boxing and not a lot of the his rise to fame part of it, but I still thought it was well done. I gave it 4 stars, and I would recommend middle graders read this if they want to get a good history of Muhammad Ali. So that's it. Those were the 20 books that I read in December. We're not going to be reading as many books in 2021 because I need to chill out. So yeah. All right, if you have read any of these, I would love to hear your comments about them down below in the description box. And yeah, let me know what you read in December that you absolutely loved. I would love to hear that as well. Other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And until next time, see ya.